So yes, today we're going to be talking about healthy habits going into the new year, more specifically how to easily kind of keep these healthy habits going beyond January. So a little bit about me first. That was a wonderful introduction, but I'll talk a little bit more. So my name is Emily. I'm the registered dietitian here. I'm also a certified personal trainer. If you're at all interested about my educational background, there it is. As Colleen said, I tend to focus on what we call integrative nutrition, which kind of combines our more functional and holistic nutrition as well as more traditional approaches. So it's kind of taking a whole body approach essentially to your body. And my goal is always to kind of help patients feel good about, what they're eating and what they're doing, while also kind of focusing on, again, kind of more healthy habits. If you are interested in this topic, learning more about this topic, or really any other nutrition-related topics, even if you want kind of more personalized care, I do offer nutritional counseling as well as meal planning. And for nutritional counseling, that is covered by most insurance plans. So our agenda for today, we're going to start with what is a healthy diet. So we'll talk about why do we need a healthy diet, what actually kind of makes up a healthy diet in a general sense, and how to make more balanced meals. We'll talk about common dietary patterns that are kind of alive and well today, including the Mediterranean diet, the low glycemic diet, intermittent fasting. And then we'll also talk about dietary fads, so what they are and how to hopefully avoid them. Then we're going to talk a little bit about intuitive exercise, stress management, and sleep health, and then finally, how to set, manage, and achieve our goals. So quite a bit that we're going to try to cover. So first, in the name of the new year, why are New Year's resolutions so hard to keep? That's something that I hear very often is, I'm so motivated, but I can't really kind of carry that on. There's a couple key reasons why we tend to see these things not do quite so well. Oftentimes it's because of unrealistic goals. Sometimes it's a kind of lack of planning, so we don't have structure to help us kind of get through things. And then oftentimes too, we're not planning for potential barriers. So this and many other things can lead resolution not to turn into a sustainable, healthy habit long term. So what we're going to talk about today is a couple of those more common resolutions and how we might, again, gain some more sustainable, healthy habits and making them a little bit easier. So that brings us to the first topic, which is diet. Why do we need a healthy dietary pattern is a very big question. Chronic diseases such as heart disease, stroke, cancer, diabetes, and arthritis are among the most common, costly, and the big word preventable of all of our health problems in the US. That means that we obviously kind of play a hand in avoiding or delaying these types of conditions. So what can a healthy diet and healthy lifestyle choices actually do for you is, again, avoid these more preventable diseases. This is showing us a non-optimized health span and then an optimized health span. So essentially what we're seeing is that in a non-optimized health span where we're not necessarily practicing healthy habits consistently, we see a earlier and greater deterioration of our quality of life, meaning that we don't get much quality years later on. And we're also dealing with a lot of these issues for much longer. Whereas when we're focusing on more healthy habits, healthy lifestyles, we're optimizing our health span and really delaying or even avoiding some of those conditions until much later on in life, getting more quality years. So when we really focus on these healthy lifestyle interventions, chiefly healthy dietary intake, which we'll talk the most about, we can dramatically improve our quality of life over time. So with that said, what is a healthy diet? Eating healthy is all about balance. So a healthy eating pattern is not about eating less. It's about getting the right food and getting it at the right time. Too much can cause conditions like obesity, heart disease, stroke, toxicity, metabolic changes, hormonal changes, and increased aging. So what we talked about before with preventable diseases. Whereas too little can cause conditions like deficiencies, bone thinning, anemia, dementia, weakness or wasting, and even things like pain. When you learn how to balance your food and adapt, again, these healthy, more sustainable eating patterns, you won't end up doing this kind of crash dieting that we'll talk a little bit about, and that can typically lead to more of that weight rebound, and again, issues later on in life. So what do we need to balance? Macronutrients is going to be the chief thing that we kind of talk about. And these are the nutrients that you need in large amounts that give you calories. So we have carbohydrates, we have fats, and then we have proteins. So this chart that you guys got, I like to call it my refrigerator chart. It's a very helpful kind of categorization of all of our food groups, and it's separated into our macronutrients. So we'll kind of go through each section and talk about how we're going to kind of highlight certain things and balance certain things. So the first section we're going to focus on here is the carbohydrates in green. So I actually have a group question. What do you think of when you think of the word carb? Anyone can shout something out. Breads, pasta, yep. It's a really big group, and it's not just our grains. So yes, grains are definitely in there, but it's also fruits, vegetables, and includes things like beans and legumes, dairy products, etc. They're also not bad foods. I love to articulate that. Carbs aren't, bad things. So let's talk a little bit more about them. So there's a lot of different ways to categorize carbs. Today we're going to simplify it into simple and complex. Simple carbs are going to be higher glycemic, so think of things like juice, candy, white bread, and pasta. High glycemic essentially means that it's going to spike your blood sugar more quickly and more dramatically. Complex carbs, so things like berries, whole wheat pasta, leafy greens, peppers, a lot of your vegetables, are going to be a lot lower glycemic because they're going to break down a lot slower and they have a lot more fiber. So this chart is kind of giving us some more examples of that differentiation between low glycemic and high glycemic. So what we can see is some typical fruits, vegetables, and grains. They're going to break down a lot slower in the body and be more of those complex carbohydrates. So these are the ones that we really want to have the most often if we can help it. The higher glycemic things tend to be higher again on that simple side and may even just be a little bit more processed. So if you think of more quote unquote ultra processed foods that have those added sugars, those are going to typically be a little bit more higher glycemic. So why does that blood sugar spike actually matter? The consequences of consuming a diet high in the simple high glycemic index carbohydrates can lead to things like insulin resistance, and that can lead to prediabetes and eventually diabetes down the line. It can also lead to things like weight gain. It can definitely lead to some issues when it comes to hunger and satiety. So oftentimes eating exclusively or a lot of high glycemic carbohydrates means you're kind of constantly hungry. It's that back and forth of, I just ate this, but now I'm still starving, that type of idea. High glycemic diets also slow down your metabolism. So how you are storing things and how you're metabolizing things is going to be affected by a high glycemic consistent diet. Complex carbs, on the other hand, the low glycemic guys, cause you to burn more fat when you exercise with a high glycemic meal with the exact same amount of calories. So essentially what that is saying is that you're acting more kind of efficiently. They also contain more nutrients and fiber, and that is because they're not stripped in some sort of processing, so you're going to get a lot more out of the complex carbohydrates. They also slow down digestion and improve your bowel habits. And it also really helps feed your microbiome. So when we talk about healthy gut bacteria, this can be a big piece to kind of keeping things in a good balance, essentially. And fiber, speaking of good bowel habits and feeding that good bacteria, fiber is super important when it comes to many aspects of health, including satiety, gut health, and energy. And we'll talk about the 4 Ds of fiber. So dilution, fiber has no calories because your body doesn't break it down into sugar. So you actually burn calories by eating it. Distension, so this leaves you feeling satisfied and full with, again, less food. Delay, so this helps keep your gut a little bit busier for a little bit longer and reduces sugar absorption. And then dumping it triggers satiety signals in your gut and traps food to start the elimination process. So a couple of examples of research that shows the impact of fiber on health. In one study encouraging one group to increase their fiber by 30 grams daily had as much health benefit as another group that was counseled on calorie counting and healthy diets in general. So what that's saying is, they weren't counseled on any type of healthy dietary pattern. They were just told strictly increase your fiber, and they still saw the same amount of benefit. So just working on fiber increase can really help as far as just generally giving you more energy and helping with those health consequences. And then in another research study, a daily half cup of black beans over 2 years is associated with a 25% decrease in central obesity or central adiposity. So again, having some kind of really big impacts when it comes to weight maintenance and overall health. So the take-home message about carbohydrates, the one that I'll put in big letters, they're not bad. That's the big thing that I really like to emphasize. There's two types, simple and complex. Simple tends to be high glycemic, and complex tend to be low glycemic. Low glycemic helps you lose weight and also helps prevent that insulin resistance. Consuming more complex carbs and fiber than simple carbs is kind of the bottom line. That's going to be the aim, the goal. And then fiber in a general sense will help you lose weight, stay full, and maintain your gut health. Next, we have our foods in yellow, and those are going to be our fats. So fats, first and foremost, not a dirty word by any means. They've gotten a really bad reputation, but it's actually very good for you. It helps you absorb vitamins, the fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K. It keeps your membranes healthy, helps you feel full, and actually protects your nerves. It does many other things, but those are some of the big ones. There are 3 types of fat: unsaturated, saturated, and trans fat. So unsaturated fat, often called good or healthy fat, is going to be from more plant sources, and it's typically going to be liquid at room temperature. So if you think of things like olive oils and that type of thing. Saturated fats, sometimes called your bad or quote-unquote unhealthy fats, when they're overconsumed, they tend to cause a higher risk of heart disease, and they're going to be in more of like our animal sources. So think of solid things, butter, etc. And then trans fats, this is a fat that we really want to avoid if we can. It's also known as partially hydrogenated oils, and for the most part, it's really only going to be in your ultra-processed foods, but even then, it's been kind of slowly taken out of the food industry, luckily enough. So a little bit more on saturated versus unsaturated. Excess saturated fat, so not just saturated fat on its own, but eating it in excess, can cause inflammation in the area of the brain responsible for regulating your appetite and causes resistance to being full. So again, this doesn't mean don't eat any saturated fat, it just means try not to over-consume saturated fat. You also tend to see a little bit more weight gain than with unsaturated fats when we're, again, excessively eating the saturated. Too much contributes to high cholesterol, as well as an imbalance in our cholesterol, insulin resistance, and heart disease. Having a proper 1-to-1 balance, unsaturated fats of the omega-3 and the omega-6 can help promote anti-inflammation, especially when you're really emphasizing the omega-3 fatty acids. So think of like fatty fish, nuts and seeds, olive oils, that type of thing. And less weight gain or even weight loss. So how do we actually balance our fats? This is the big question. A simple equation, we're going to increase our unsaturated fat, so again, including things like fatty fish, avocados, olives, nuts, and certain vegetable oils. And we're going to decrease our saturated fats, so cheeses, red meats, more processed foods, butter, animal fats, etc. A healthy diet includes both saturated and unsaturated fats. So again, we're not cutting out those saturated fats by any means. An easy way to balance them out is to try to consume at least 2 times more of your unsaturated fats. A very important note here, all forms of fat, so saturated, unsaturated, trans fat, are all very calorically dense. So a little bit goes a long way. Rather than really kind of drowning in our fat, even when we are choosing our healthy fats, we're going to be mindful of drizzle, handful, tablespoon, teaspoon, etc. But yeah.
Nuts. Mm-hmm. Certain kinds of nuts, or nuts across the board?
Nuts across the board, whatever you like. Good question. Some are obviously more dense than others, but that depends. So in a general sense, again, definitely including it, just mindful of what type, how much. So fats, the take-home message, it's calorically dense. There's 3 types. Unsaturated, which is considered your quote-unquote healthy, which is anti-inflammatory and can help with weight loss. Saturated, which can promote weight gain when eaten in excess, so eat it in moderation. And then trans fat, try to avoid. Lastly, we have protein. So that's going to be all of our orange sections. Protein is very, very, very important. It's important for satiety. It's important for keeping you full and giving you energy. It's made up of amino acids, and there are 9 that are considered essential, meaning we need to consume them in the diet because we don't make them in our bodies. Complete proteins contain all 9 of those essential acids, and those are going to be mainly from animal sources. Whereas incomplete proteins are going to be more so from plant sources, meaning that they don't have all of the complete proteins. So a quick note about intake during weight loss. Muscle turnover, which is building and breaking down, is normal for everyone. When you're losing weight, you need to eat enough protein so that you don't lose too much muscle. Whenever you eat fewer calories than you burn, i.e. losing weight, you always lose some muscle mass. How much you lose depends on how much protein that you're consuming and maintaining regular exercise. So that concept of use it or lose it is certainly in play here. So choosing high quality is going to be kind of the name of the game when it comes to protein intake. The best sources of protein will give you all 9 of those essential amino acids. So that's going to be lean meats and fish, milk products, eggs, and then soy and tofu in moderation if you do enjoy it. If you choose to use plant proteins, you'll need to know which sources complement one another so that you can get all of those essential amino acids. Some varied examples would be something like nuts and seeds with some sort of whole grain. So think of like peanut butter on toast, that type of idea. Whole grains plus a bean or legume would also give you a complete protein. So beans and rice is a very typical one. Hummus and pita is another really popular. Or even beans with things like nuts and seeds. So if you had a salad, chickpeas plus like a sunflower seed, that would give you a complete protein. Be mindful of high-fat preserved proteins. So think of things like deli meats, bacon, and sausage. And even things like smoked fish, we'll try to limit those, not only again for that high-fat content, the high saturated fat, but the sodium as well. Timing is another big question when it comes to protein intake. So ideally, we'd want to spread our protein intake evenly throughout the day. This is really going to help us optimize muscle mass as well as keeping hunger at bay, so again, really improving satiety overall. So rather than what we might think of like a typical very carb-heavy breakfast and a very protein-heavy dinner, what we'd aim to do is include a lean protein and a high-fiber carb with pretty much every meal and snack that we do end up having. A typical meal, if you are breaking up into 2 to 3 meals per day, would be somewhere around 25 to 30 grams of protein to give you that kind of overall daily maintenance. And then a quick note on exercising. When you are working out, consuming protein within 2 hours of finishing is the most ideal when it comes to muscle regeneration and recovery. So a quick take-home message when it comes to our protein intake. Obviously, we want to consume enough protein when losing weight to prevent muscle loss. We also want to make sure that we're having protein just in general for health, satiety, etc. High quality sources will have all 9 essential amino acids. Animal products and byproducts are the examples there. Or if you're going for more plant-based things, then pairing them together. And then spreading your protein intake throughout the day and consuming with some within 2 hours after working out is going to be the most efficient. Now we're going to focus a little bit on what we call nutrient-rich foods or nutrient-dense foods. So by nutrients, I mean micronutrients. So we talked about macro before, and now we're talking about micro. Those are going to be vitamins, minerals, and what we call phytonutrients, so it gives things their color. These are obviously very important when it comes to just baseline health, but then also just kind of how you're feeling, energy, immune health, gut health, etc. So when we're consuming what we call a whole food diet, meaning food that is minimally processed, if at all processed, we're going to do a pretty good job of getting a wide variety of nutrient-dense foods. So those are foods that still contain a lot of their nutrients from, when they're grown or when they are, let's say, brought in. This chart emphasizes what are called therapeutic foods. So all of the foods that are highlighted there. There's going to be foods that are especially dense in what we call those phytonutrients. So they can be really beneficial when it comes to things like being anti-inflammatory. They can be great for gut health, skin health, heart health, brain health, etc. These two sections in particular contain some of the most nutrient-dense foods. So our fruits and our vegetables are going to be really important to include as often as you can, ideally daily. And then on top of that, on these charts here, we have some charts about essentially the different colors of food and how they can potentially benefit us, again, if we're including them regularly in the diet. So a lot of them, again, are going to give us that anti-inflammatory, anti-cancer, cell protection. Ideally, we'd want to eat the rainbow, as it's often said. So getting a good variety of things throughout the day, varying how you cook them, how you include them, that's going to make sure that you get a lot of really good nutrient variety. So lots of different colors, lots of different benefits when we eat them regularly. Even white, tan, brown foods are considered a color, so can definitely give you some of those benefits. So when it comes to actually balancing these things out, we've talked about, okay, what is making up the plate? Let's talk about how to bring it together. Balancing your plate will provide more nutrients per meal, prevent spikes in your blood sugar, keep you fuller for longer. So that's one of the big ones. The ratios that I tend to really focus on is a half plate of non-starchy vegetables or low glycemic vegetables, a half plate of lean, high-quality protein or paired protein, and then a half plate, or a fourth plate, sorry, of a low glycemic carb or starch of choice. We're also going to include fats and oils in there. Again, not drowning in them, drizzle, handful, tablespoon, teaspoon on top, etc. But this is going to give us the most optimal, satiety, really good for energy, and again, getting a lot of those nutrient-dense foods as we go through. Snacks should also have this kind of balance between carbs, protein, and fat, again, to help kind of keep you full. So here are some pretty examples of what that might actually look like on a plate. So here we have a burger of some kind with salad and some sweet potato. This is a very delicious breakfast that I wish I had energy to do every day. So we have some grilled vegetables, a couple of eggs, toast, and avocado. This is a very colorful salad. So we've got some grilled chicken, we've got a variety of vegetables on there, and then we have some healthy whole grain and some healthy fat. And then lastly, this is a great example of a snack that still includes these, proper proportions. So we have a half plate of lots of different colors of vegetables. We've got some hummus, we've got some feta cheese, and then we've got some whole grain crackers. So again, gonna really optimize that satiety, keeping you full, as well as getting a really good variety of nutrients. So now let's talk about some common dietary patterns that we see very often throughout. So the Mediterranean is one of my favorites. It's very, very common. It has been proven to reduce the risk of heart disease, metabolic syndrome, diabetes, certain types of cancers, and depression. And the plate balance that we just discussed actually fits very well with the Mediterranean eating pattern. There's an emphasis on whole, quote unquote, unprocessed foods. So fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, and legumes. Olive oil is the principal or main source of fat, so cooking with it, adding it on top. Cheese and yogurt consumed daily in low to moderate amounts. Fish and poultry consumed in low to moderate amounts a few times a week. Very low red meat consumption, and then very low sweet or quote unquote extra consumption. Another thing that the Mediterranean eating pattern tends to emphasize is healthy activity as well, which we'll talk more about as we go. So some easy swaps to make to include a more quote unquote Mediterranean eating style day by day would be doing swaps like butter for olive oil, a refined grain for a whole grain, so things like bulgur, barley, couscous, whole wheat, nuts and olives as snacks, 4 to 5 servings of vegetables per day, and again, getting a variety of color. Adding a dark green salad to each meal can be a great swap in. And then 3 servings of legumes or lentils per week, again, focusing a little bit more on that lean plant protein. Red meat swapping for primarily fish and poultry when we are having animal products. Beer and liquor switching for red wine if you do drink. If you don't, you don't have to. And then sugary desserts, opting for more fresh or poached fruit, or again, just limiting how much we have. The low glycemic eating pattern is another one that is very common. So it focuses on controlling your blood sugar to best support hunger, satiety, and energy throughout the day. It is very often used with blood glucose disorders, so things like diabetes, but it can be applied to many other aspects of health. Basically what you want to focus on, it's relatively simple, whole carbohydrate options more often, so higher fiber, more whole grain type of idea, including protein and fat with each meal and snack, and limiting again your quote unquote extras. So very similar to the Mediterranean eating pattern, but a little bit more, less strict, let's say. Intermittent fasting is another very popular one. Essentially what we're gonna see is having elongated fasts helps to control eating, hunger, and blood sugar. It's usually done in fast feed cycles, so 12-12, 16-8, 18-6, or even 24. The most popular is 16-8. For some, this fits naturally with their body's rhythm and helps them prevent overeating. This is where I really like to kind of focus on, let's say, a caveat with intermittent fasting. If you're someone who wakes up and you're immediately hungry and you wake up at 6 a.m., waiting to eat until 12 is not realistic for you. So that's where intermittent fasting, you kind of have to piece it together as far as what actually kind of tunes into your normal hunger. In a general sense, if you are following a fast, you can have water, non-caloric beverages, tea and coffee, obviously no sugar or milk, and then also supplements throughout that fasting period. And then again, as a general note, intermittent fasting, it's not a balanced way of eating per se. It's more so just looking at the timing of eating. So if you're interested in intermittent fasting, you would want to couple it with another type of eating pattern. So essentially, intermittent fasting plus Mediterranean, intermittent fasting plus low glycemic, that type of idea. Some other really common dietary patterns that you may see, paleo, or it's also called like the caveman diet. That's another fun way to word it. It's based on the types of foods that are presumed to eat in that kind of more paleo era. And it focuses on meat, fish, vegetables, fruits, and excludes more of the quote unquote processed food items. Vegetarian, vegan, obviously excluding either meat or all animal products. A flexitarian, so this is a mostly plant-based diet, but it does include the occasional meat, poultry, fish, eggs, or dairy. The DASH diet, this is dietary approaches to stop hypertension. This is actually very similar to the Mediterranean diet, but it's aimed at helping to control blood pressure and heart disease. And it focuses on fruits, vegetables, whole grains, lean meats, etc. A plant-based diet, so again, very similar to a flexitarian or even the Mediterranean diet. It's a plant-based approach focusing on consuming more nutrient-dense foods. Low carb or high protein, there are many, many, many variations of these types of dietary patterns, but typically they're going to limit the more quote-unquote processed or added sugar foods. And typically they're also going to include a lot more protein. The ketogenic diets, so this is a very, very low carbohydrate diet, and it was originally designed actually to help control epilepsy in children, believe it or not. And then the SAD, this is the standard American diet. It's typically going to be a lot higher in the more quote-unquote processed foods and lack some of those more nutrient-dense foods, as well as like the lean proteins, the healthy fats, etc. So how do you find the right dietary pattern? I always like to talk about assessing where you're at right now. So not doing a complete 180 from what you're currently eating, but kind of making slow changes towards a healthier eating pattern overall. Considering your likes and dislikes is a huge thing that I feel like sometimes is kind of put by the wayside. If you don't like fish or seafood, then the Mediterranean eating pattern might not be right for you, and that's okay. So finding something that does make sense for you is really important. And then paying attention to your hunger, satiety, and energy throughout the day. So this one definitely applies more to timing. Again, if you're someone who wakes up hungry, intermittent fasting in the morning might not be a great idea. And then again, kind of emphasizing working on small changes and improvements to get you to that healthier eating pattern more sustainably. Dietary fads. So let's talk a little bit about some things that might kind of pop up on social media or that you might have seen here and there when it comes to the next new thing to try. So what are fads? A diet fad is usually a popular dietary pattern that promises quick, easy, or unrealistic weight loss or some sort of health benefit. There's typically not much scientific evidence to actually support that. The thing that I always say about fads is that there's always going to be a new one. They're always going to be around. There's never going to be a time when there's not some sort of dietary fad kind of popping about. So it's really important to be able to spot them. So most dietary fads are going to be very restrictive. Typically, they're going to be very unbalanced. So they're not going to, talk about having a variety of things. It's saying only this, never that. Typically, they're going to promise some type of quick results. Again, they're going to lack scientific evidence, so the research typically isn't going to be really kind of promoting these things. And a lot of times, they're also going to use a lot of fear-mongering. So if you think about a headline on Facebook that you might have seen that says, oh, this food is killing you, or, they only eat these foods. So it tends to kind of really catch your attention. Some dietary fads will also only be for a very specific amount of time, so a couple of weeks, a month, etc. And a lot of times they're also going to require you to purchase something. So it might be, okay, buy this specific product from us, or only buy this type of thing.
I'm not sure I understand.
Me neither. So some risks of following fads. Yo-yo dieting, this is the big thing. So this is typically going to be a lifelong pattern of following a diet, losing weight, getting off of the diet, gaining weight, getting onto a new diet. So it's kind of that constant back and forth of I'm trying this next new thing, I'm trying this next new thing, and waiting for something to work. Nutrient deficiencies. So since a lot of these guys tend to be very, very restrictive, we're often lacking something. Potential health problems, as we talked about kind of throughout, unnecessary restriction really in any category can definitely cause several health issues or even a higher risk of more chronic complications later in life. Issues with weight maintenance in the future overall, so it can definitely damage your metabolism to be kind of jumping back and forth. And then this one's huge to me as a more functional and holistic dietitian, damaging your relationship to food overall and to your body overall. So oftentimes when we're labeling things as bad, we then feel bad when we eat them. So trying to avoid those things and kind of calling a spade, all food is food, can really help us avoid damaging that relationship. Some examples of fad diets. A very, very low fat. This was very popular in the 80s and 90s, still somewhat reminiscent today. The Whole30 or Hard 75, there's many variations of this, but again, it's a short amount of time, very restrictive. Juice cleanses or detoxes, there's a little caveat there. There are instances when a detox or even an elimination diet are warranted or even indicated, but a lot of times when, again, it's promoting a specific product may not be worth your time. The grapefruit, cucumber, and broth diet, there are many variations of this as well that say only eat this thing for a week, for a couple of days, etc. Very, very restrictive. The carnivore diet, that's a kind of a new one, but again, very restrictive, completely disregarding an entire group of macros. The keto diet, I'll specify here the commercialized version of the keto, so not the ketogenic diet. So when you're looking at the store and it's like keto friendly, that type of idea, they tend to be really high sodium, really high saturated fat. Atkins, very similar, very high fat. The gluten-free diet, this is another caveat. If you have celiac disease or gluten sensitivity, obviously a gluten-free diet is very important. That's what you need to do. But if you don't have those things, then buying exclusively gluten-free products in the name of health or weight maintenance, typically not going to be super warranted or helpful. And then the blood type diet, this is another one that just kind of doesn't really have concrete evidence or concrete research. Most of the diets that they suggest per specific blood type, if anyone follows them, they're going to be pretty helpful. So for instance, I believe they say for type A blood, have like a plant-based diet. Anyone could benefit from a type A or from a plant-based diet. So it's, again, kind of lacking some research there. No, oh yeah. Yeah.
There was a physician who was on the East Coast,
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Giordano, the father of the author, and he was very, very strict. 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 And for age patients and do subtyping of blood types.
So another caveat where it's like it can't be generalized, right? And that's an important note too when we're talking about personalized nutrition in a general sense. There are so many instances where one thing is going to work amazingly for someone and then not at all for the next. So being able to kind of look at things proactively can be really helpful too. So now we'll talk about another really big resolution that people tend to have, which is getting more activity, more exercise. And we'll talk about that specifically with what we call intuitive exercise. So what is intuitive exercise? Intuitive exercise, also known as intuitive movement, focuses on choosing physical activity that feels good and fulfilling while also listening to what your body needs. So it's flexible and individualized, very similar to what we were just talking about, and maybe most importantly helps you develop a positive relationship with activity and exercise. There are two key aspects to intuitive exercise, and it's connecting with your body and finding joy in movement. So how do you actually initiate or find intuitive exercise? One big question is finding movement that you actually, underlined, enjoy. So try not to focus rather on what you should do, and try to kind of ask yourself, what do I want to do, or what actually sounds appealing to me? Sometimes even asking yourself the question of, if this activity didn't burn calories or change something about me, would I still do it? That can be a really important question to finding something that you actually enjoy. Consider the reason that you are exercising. So reflecting and trying to shift, solely from weight loss to maybe, kind of celebrating your body, feeling better in your body, getting more energy, that type of thing. Notice how exercise feels in your body. So before, during, after, kind of what's going through your mind. Before exercise, thinking, all right, do I want something maybe intense today? Do I want something more calm, more restorative? During exercise, how does this feel in this moment? Can I increase the intensity? Do I need to decrease the intensity? Do I need to stop? And then afterwards, kind of noticing how you feel. So saying, has my energy improved? Do I feel rejuvenated? Do I feel satisfied? Do I not? And then kind of exploring, okay, what activities do make me feel those things? Finding intrinsic motivation can be really impactful as well, which essentially just means finding that internal motivation and finding, again, something that really kind of speaks to you. And then obviously seeking professional support as needed. So talking to a dietitian, a personal trainer, or even a therapist that is trained in intuitive exercise or can help you kind of find some things that genuinely do feel good for your body. How do we integrate that activity? Integrating intuitive movement is all about exploration. So starting with intention, finding some of that motivation, and then exploring different avenues for movement is the way to go about it. Examples, there are many different examples of what we might try to explore for activity, but body weight movement either at home or at a gym, a bar class, a Pilates class, a boot camp of some kind, lifting weights either with physical weights or a weight machine, resistance bands, dance classes, the list goes on and on and on as far as what you could actually explore to find something that, again, kind of genuinely speaks to you. Another thing that I love to emphasize is finding your why. So this is definitely talking a little bit more about that internal motivation factor. Many people tend to focus on physical attributes or, again, weight loss when talking about introducing activity. So trying to find a more, let's say, inclusive reason to activity can really help us make it a more sustainable habit. So for some examples, saying, okay, I want to be able to play with my kids. I want to play with my grandkids when I'm older. I want to remain independent. I want to be able to walk without a cane. I want to be able to stand up without no help. All of those things can certainly give you a little bit more internal motivation and not just focus on one aspect of why we might have activity in our lives. And then just some local exercise resources. There's many, many, many in our area, both more quote unquote commercialized gyms as well as more standalone kind of personal gyms. But again, you can kind of explore throughout the region and see what makes sense for you, what do you genuinely enjoy. Now we'll talk a little bit about stress management. So this is a part of, let's say, a double with resolutions. A very common one is be happier. So how do we be happier? We'll talk about stress management and sleep. So first, we want to try to reduce stressors where it's possible. Time management can be very helpful, so using tools to stay organized and prevent feeling overwhelmed, and trying not to get caught up in the exhaustion Olympics, which just means kind of go, 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 we're never stopping. Taking time for hobbies or me time, self-time, is a huge one when it comes to self-regulating stress. Socializing, prioritizing your friends, family, and relationships and community can be a really big piece to making sure that you're really reducing stress overall. Taking breaks, so listening to music, taking time in nature, getting plenty of sleep, all of these things can definitely help reduce general stress. So some resources for those activities. Free calendar apps such as Google Calendar can do lists, reminders, and schedules, again, to help kind of keep you a little bit more organized. There are also free apps like Sweepy that can help you kind of keep your space tidy, which can certainly help with stress in general. And then there are many, many free YouTube workouts or exercise programs that you can find that can definitely help with stress management and reduction as well. And then when we talk about nature, Concord has the Concord Trails Committee with guided hikes, so that can be a great way to connect a little bit more outside. Mental support, so mindfulness, a type of meditation or paying attention to how you're experiencing and feeling in moments in a non-judgmental way. Recognizing what you feel without forcing yourself to change it. So this is a huge one when it comes to stress management in general. You don't have to deal with the problem, it's just kind of recognizing the problem. That's the first step. And then therapy, there's some self techniques that you can certainly include, like cognitive restructuring or controlled breathing. So deep breathing, imagery, meditation, all those types of things can definitely be helpful. And then a therapist can also provide you with many tools outside of those to manage your anxiety and restructure your kind of current coping methods. So a very big example, the most common would be CPT or cognitive behavioral therapy. So some mental support resources. There's guided meditation apps, so think of things like Headspace. Cognitive restructuring how-tos through the American Psychiatric Association. Through their website, they have a pretty cool thing you can go through. And then local counseling centers, Riverbend is a great one, and then Authentically You is another that we often refer with. And then if you're looking for additional therapists that are covered by your insurance in particular, Psychology Today has a really cool tool called Therapist Finder. So you can search through and find counselors, therapists, psychologists in your area. Now we'll talk a little bit about sleep health. So some tips for better sleep. For stimulants, we're going to avoid caffeine, nicotine, and stimulant medications after 12 to 3. And then we're also going to avoid heavy exercising after 6. That is because exercising kind of releases a lot of endorphins, which can certainly keep you awake, especially if you're doing it too close to bedtime. Food and drink, no big meals 2 hours before bed. If you're hungry, eating a small snack can definitely be helpful just to kind of keep you asleep. We want to avoid those big heavy meals before we're laying down. And then also if you're someone who tends to wake up for the bathroom overnight, reducing your fluid intake before bedtime. And if you need just kind of small sips can certainly be beneficial. For light, we're going to avoid bright light and blue light from electronics 1 to 2 hours before bed to increase melatonin, and that can help with more restful sleep throughout the night. And then during the day, once you're awake, increasing light. So this turns off melatonin production and creates the more alertness. So this is kind of going with your natural circadian rhythm. Relaxation. Have relaxing routines like baths, music, or meditation close to bedtime, and stop stimulating activity 1 hour before bed. And then clear your mind, make a list for the coming days so you don't dwell on them at night, especially if you're someone who tends to hyperfixate or kind of go through those cycles as you fall asleep. Scheduling, try to set a schedule that allows 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night and maintain a regular cycle even on the weekends. So this is something that I really like to articulate. If you're someone who gets very little sleep during the week and then sleeps a lot over the weekend, that may not be actually very helpful for you. So trying to kind of find a middle ground can definitely keep you a little bit more balanced. And then refrain from naps unless needed and restrict those naps. So try not to nap for 2-3 hours at a time. When it comes to environment, you want to keep the bedroom dark, quiet, and tidy, as well as a little bit of a cooler temperature. And you want to use a light block mask if necessary, and socks if needed. And then trouble sleeping, don't force yourself to sleep. Instead, get up for a few minutes, engage in some type of relaxing activity. If you're staying in bed and you're not tired, then that can kind of train the brain to be awake in bed. So try to avoid that as best you can. If you need supplements for sleep, that's a-okay, a lot of people do. Melatonin is a great one. So this nighttime hormone is crucial for your sleep and wake cycle. It can help you sleep better, adjust to a new time zone, improve your sleep quality, and many other things. Dosing for melatonin, the ones that we recommend are actually dissolvable, so they're sublingual under the tongue. It's the fastest absorbed, so that's going to be the most effective when it comes to sleep. And you can kind of reduce that as needed on there. L-theanine is another great one. It's an amino acid found in green tea, and it really helps with kind of calming the mind. So if you in particular deal with that racing mind at night, L-theanine can be a great add-in. And again, there's some dosing instructions there. And then valerian root, this can really help when it comes to improving the speed at which you fall asleep, as well as getting you to a deeper, more restful sleep. So any combination of these three, or even just one, can definitely be considered when it comes to getting a little bit more restful sleep throughout the day. Great. So our last section, how to set, manage, and achieve goals. So what we're going to focus on is what we call SMART goals. And this is an acronym that stands for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. So specific, what do you want to do? We're trying to make sure that we're being really particular and not setting a more general guideline. Measurable, how will you know when you've done it? Attainable, is it actually within your power to do this thing? Realistic, very similar. Can you realistically achieve this? And then time-bound, when are you actually accomplishing it by? So a SMART goal is not, I want to exercise more or I want to eat healthier. A SMART goal would look more like, I will walk my dog at least 3 times a week for a minimum of 30 minutes for the next month, or I will include 1 vegetable with dinner at least 3 times this week. So they're definitely a little bit more of a mouthful, but they're going to be a lot more helpful when it comes to actually kind of structuring a plan for you and making things a bit more attainable. So putting it all together, assess yourself and where you're at. So as I said before, trying to pay attention to, okay, what am I currently doing? What are my current habits and how can I slowly build on them is the best way to sustainably go about things. Selecting a few SMART goals to start and then making a plan with how are we going to achieve these things. Try not to do more than 3 or 4 at once, otherwise it might be overwhelming. So this is another big thing when it comes to the age of, again, resolutions, the new year. Sometimes we kind of get that all or nothing mentality and say, I'm going to do everything. I'm going to change everything about, my lifestyle, my habits, and then we fall off. So trying to start with just a couple to, again, make it a little bit more realistic can be a lot more helpful. Use a balanced, sustainable eating pattern to meet those goals. So again, trying to avoid more of the dietary fads or the things that might not be super realistic. This will be slow, but again, it will give you more lifelong, sustainable habits. And as you meet one goal, so for instance, getting 30 grams of fiber per day, make another. So for instance, swapping out butter for olive oil. So you can start slow, you can start with just a couple of things and slowly build. And continually assess your progress, your goals, and your health. See where you're at, see what direction you want to go in. And remember, you don't need the new year to make a healthy change in your life or develop a new healthy habit. You can do it anytime. This is just the most popular time to do it. If you do need help, saying is obviously a lot easier than doing. So working with a professional for planning, guidance, encouragement, accountability can be very, very helpful and definitely increase your chances of success with those goals. We offer, as I said at the beginning, personalized nutrition and counseling that can help you set and realize your goals, tracks your progress, provides personalized diet and lifestyle guidance, works with any health conditions, so again, more personalized, assesses hidden causes. And as I mentioned at the top as well, we do take insurance for the dietitian visits, and these are the ones that we do currently take. So thank you guys so much for coming out tonight in the cold, cold weather. Does anyone have any questions?